What's up, guys? Air Codes here on another walk today. A little gloomy. Hopefully I don't get rained on. Hopefully it holds out. But so today, again, I'm not, if you've been following the Ruby series, I didn't have anything new there. Haven't had the chance to kind of get into some more development and spend some more time in there. So that will still be coming. Just hasn't happened the last couple nights. Spent time in other places of my life that need time and attention, to spend some time with my wife and my kids and that sort of thing. So that's where I was doing with those 2 nights. But that being said, I was on Reddit again, and this time I was just reading a post. I think it was in the subreddit Learn Programming, and there was a person that said that they really want to learn how to code. They really want to learn programming. And they were asking, what language to learn and, all these other things. So here's the thing. I've talked about this before. I'm going to say it again because people keep asking this question, and it's the wrong question to ask. Okay. And that question is, what coding language should I learn? It's not a good question. And the reason for that is it's missing a big piece, a big important piece. And that is, what is the best coding language to learn for? That FOR, that for is extremely important, okay? Because depending on what you want to do, right? Depending on what you want to do, that is going to tell you what you should be doing. So this person, they're very nice, right? And I was going back and forth. I was trying to help them out. But this person asked the question, right? And they, people, on the subreddit started saying all sorts of different things, and you should learn this and you should learn that, like C++, this and that, and what they were all thinking, all right? And I'm not saying that any of their advice is bad. I think their advice is misguided, right? Because it depends, right? If you want to make WordPress websites or do web development, C++, I don't really think it's that crucial of a language to learn. You can have a whole career and never open C++, okay? I have never opened up C++, never tried, okay? So that being said, right, am I an expert to talk about C++? No, but I know what it's for, all right? So it's filled with people giving their 2 cents, right? And my response basically was this. I said, well, that depends. What do you want to learn, right? Do you want to learn web development? My suggestion on that, JavaScript and PHP, both of them, because it's going to open a lot of doors, a lot of opportunities for you to work, right? So that was my response, JavaScript to PHP for web development. I said, do you want to be a game developer? Probably to learn C#, and like Unity or something like that, the framework. I said, do you want to make iOS applications? Your only option is Swift, right? You want to do Android, Kotlin or Java. So I guess the point I was trying to say was figure out what you want to do and then decide what avenue you want to go down. And so that was kind of my initial response, saying, hey, you got to figure out what you want. Based on what you want to do, that's going to help you decide on what you want to get into next, right? And so the response that came back from the original poster was, well, people are telling me that those languages are high level, and that C++ should be the way I should go. And I was like, why does that matter? High level, low level, you don't know what you're talking about. You're assuming that high level and low level mean things that they don't mean, right? So for those of us who may be new to programming, when somebody says it's a high level, it means it's level of abstraction, right? Because the way programming languages work is they basically, computers talk in switches, right? The switch is on or the switch is off. And those hundreds of thousands of these switches, maybe millions, I don't know, the chips are so small anymore. And depending on if there's an electrical current going through the switch or not, it says if it's a 0 or it's a 1. And based on the combinations of 0 and 1s, tells you what the thing is, right? That's how a computer understands things, right? So when somebody says low level language, that means a language that is a low level of abstraction from 0s and 1s, right? Assembly is one of these, right? COBOL is pretty low, right? So there are these very low, very close to the hardware languages. And so like C and C++, they're one of those that's a little bit closer than something like JavaScript, okay? So JavaScript is a high level of abstraction, right? So when it comes to that, right, and you're a beginner, you've never programmed before, right? How are you going to understand what high level versus low level means? You don't. And it's okay. It's okay you don't understand. You're not supposed to understand. So these people that are answering this question and giving this advice, it's misguided advice, right? Because the person's a beginner. They're not you. What's going to help them become a programmer? What's going to help them understand programming, right? And so what I explained to this person was, hey, because when they said, oh yeah, everyone's saying I should learn C++, I said, C++ is a great choice. You're always going to have a job in C++, you know? And if you really want to learn that, it's fine. But I recommended you start with Python or JavaScript or PHP, something that's a little bit higher level. And the reason I said that was because I mentioned pointers and memory allocation and garbage collection, right? And it's like, this person, I guarantee you, doesn't know what those things are, and they shouldn't know what those things are, okay? But to tell someone who's never programmed before, never gotten like hello world in the terminal or on the browser, it's not good advice to tell them to learn C++. It's just not. Because what's gonna happen is they're gonna be so confused, unless some sort of miracle they have just a brain like a sponge and can kind of get all that to make sense, right? It's not a good way to start for them. What would be much better is saying, hey, open up a browser, you know, name a file .html. Don't put anything in it you don't need to, right? Or you could just put the boilerplate in and open it. Right click, say, and go down to inspect and go to the console and then put console log, whatever. And immediately they can start to understand programming, right? It's that first thing like, oh, okay. So talk to the browser, log something to the console. That's what we're doing, right? Or even HTML, right? Put hello world in an H1 tag. Oh, okay. This is what this thing is. Softly introduce them to stuff that they can understand and they can see, okay? Because all you're doing when a beginner says, what should I learn? And you say C++, you're just making it harder on them. You're just making it, and if they follow that advice, and again, I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying most likely the person will either give up on it or they'll be like, this is too hard, and they'll switch to something else anyways, you know? And then I further explained, right? And I said, I would start with JavaScript, PHP, or Python. Start with those three. There's no types, right? It's not statically typed. It's dynamically typed. So you don't need to worry about that at the start, right? Because that's already hard enough. Just understanding a variable and then putting the variable into the console, right? For JavaScript, or printing it out to the screen or printing it out to the console. explain the difference between typing and all the different types of, float or decimal or a big int or whatever language you're like, it's not helpful. Okay, it's not helpful to get them started. Now, you could say, like, eventually, right? You want to go to C++, that's fine. But don't tell them to start there, right? At least that's my advice. You can learn, and this was my advice, I said, pick one of those languages and learn basic programming concepts. Learn what a variable is. Learn what types are. Learn how to loop over things, right? When you've gotten most of those concepts down, right? If statements, right? If else, switch statements. Learn what those things are. Then learn about classes and object-oriented programming, right? Be familiar when there's words like encapsulation or, polymorphism, or like all those words are big. They're really not complicated, but you need to understand how to use a class before you jump into Java and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Right? What is this? You need to understand what's happening, why classes work the way that they work before you jump into Java, or C# or C++, right? That's classes too. You need to understand these things. And so what I said is, figure out what you want to do. Go practice with these other languages. Get familiar with all of these things. Get through, understanding object-oriented programming, okay? And once you have those, then transition into another language if it's what you want to do, right? And I also said, back to the high level, low level, right? There are so many things that are nice on a high level programming language. Things like garbage collection, right? Like not having to, repoint the memory, reallocate it. Like you don't have to do that in PHP. You don't have to do that in these languages. They're garbage collected. You don't have to worry about it. And things like memory leaks and those sorts of things, right? Like, why throw an encyclopedia at somebody who's learning to read for the first time, right? Doesn't make sense, does it? Right? You're going to throw them the spot books, right? See Spot Run, right? Or Five Little Monkeys Jumping on a Bed, right? They know the rhyme and they can read along with it and learn, right? Like throwing them an encyclopedia when they can't learn it is ridiculous. Give them more practical advice. Now, if this person's going to take the advice I have to give, I don't know. They're probably going to listen to all the other opinions out there and people saying X, Y, Z and what they should do instead. And unfortunately, that's the world that we live right now with keyboard warriors and programming, right? People make certain languages their hill to die on. Their way's the right way. It's like, I'm not here to tell you that. I'm here to give you practical advice. Figure out what you want to do, okay? Figure out what you want to do. Do you want to go into video games? Do you want to make desktop applications? Do you want to work for a big corporate bank? Do you want to build websites? Do you want to make applications? What is it that butters your bread, right? What is it that you want to do? Once you get that answer, okay, you'll be able to figure out which coding language would be the best for you. AI, right? Python's probably the way to go for that, right? Because there's so many different libraries you can work with. But figure it out, right? And I told this person who was talking about C++, I'm like, listen, C++, those are low level, right? As you've stated, if you're like, yo, man, I think the example I used because I was looking at it in the morning was the coffee pot, right? The coffee pot is a little tiny display, right? And there's functionality on it, like you can program a time, right? It's got AM, PM. It's got, you can program into it a time that says when you want it to start and brew, right? You have a temperature setting. You have, buttons that change the time. you know, all those things, like clean function, right? Sound on, sound off. Those are where probably most of the work in like C and C++ are going to be. Like, I mean, aside from like these huge systems where they need to be super efficient, or you have millions of users or whatever it is, right? It's going to be taking and using the small little device with as much jam-packed functionality as you can in a small chip, right? That is where C and C++ are going to shine. And that's also why they're always going to be really relevant, because they make that possible, right? You're not going to run Python on a small little device. I mean, you can, like a Raspberry Pi or something like that, but like, you know, you're just not going to. It takes too much, it needs too much else, right? So C and C++ are the better ones to do that. So if that butters your bread, you know, like getting as much functionality to this tiniest possible device, I would say like C and C++, that's definitely the way you want to start going, right? But I didn't say start there. Don't start with C++. Start with Python, start with PHP, start with JavaScript. One of those. Doesn't matter which one, pick one, okay? And then once you've got basic programming concepts down, then you could say, all right, I understand what's happening here, right? When, you know, what is it? Public static void main string args, right? For public static void main string args, I think that's what it is for Java, right? When you're actually calling that main function or main method, you know what's happening, right? You're just calling all the other classes that you have in your project in, and you're doing stuff with them and you're putting them out, right? You're not gonna understand Java before you can understand what a loop is. You're just not. So again, I use the analogy, start with C spot run, start with, you know, Dr. Seuss books for kids to read before you throw an encyclopedia at them. It's too much for them. They're not gonna get it. They're not gonna understand, you know, just like somebody who's beginning to program. Nurture them, give them the good advice to help them learn. And will there be somebody that's the offshoot and you can say, hey, learn C++, and they go and they do it? Absolutely. Okay, there are people out there that can do that. I am not one of those people, all right? I'm just someone who has taught myself, then taken a boot camp, then gotten a job and been in the industry for 3 years. Like, so call is yours. Again, hopefully if you're a beginner programmer, this made sense to you. Always feel free to drop a question down in the comment section. I'd be happy to answer it and kind of coach you up and kind of fill you in. I mean, you can watch the rest of my channel to see where I started and how I made a change, you know, in my 30s. So it's not impossible. You can do it. You just gotta set yourself up for success. So anyways, that's my talk for today. Again, this is Eric Codes. Hope everyone's having a great time out there, and we'll see you next time.